The little girl lived in a small house with her parents and younger brother. The house was full of warmth, with laughter echoing through the kitchen and the scent of fresh bread often drifting from the oven. She loved her home, the backyard where she could run freely, and the little garden where her mother grew flowers. But there was one thing in her life that she did not love, one thing that always made her heart sink when she thought about it: piano lessons. Her parents had decided when she was very young that she should learn the piano. They believed it was important for her future, a skill that would open doors and give her discipline. They meant well, but the little girl felt trapped. She did not understand why she had to spend hours sitting in front of a piano when she could be outside, running and playing, or sitting with a book, imagining stories of magical places and faraway lands. The piano sat in the corner of the living room, a large dark wooden instrument that seemed to loom over her whenever she walked past it. She would touch the keys sometimes, not because she wanted to play, but because her fingers were curious. The keys were smooth and cold under her touch, and she would press them lightly, feeling a small thrill when the notes rang out. But soon that thrill would disappear as the lessons began, the notes becoming rules and tasks rather than music. Her teacher was kind but firm. She had a strict schedule and expected the girl to practice every day. The girl often tried to protest, saying she didn't like it, that she wanted to play outside or draw, but her parents would gently remind her that learning the piano was important. Just for a little while, they would say, "You might find that you enjoy it." The girl didn't believe them. She didn't want to enjoy it. She only wanted to run, laugh, and be free. At first, the lessons were frustrating. She struggled with the simplest songs, the rhythm escaping her, the notes feeling like a language she could not understand. She would try to follow the teacher's instructions, her small hands moving awkwardly over the keys, but the sounds that came out were harsh and uneven. She felt clumsy and embarrassed. Sometimes she would cry quietly in her room after a lesson, wishing she could just be anywhere else. Her parents tried to be encouraging. They would clap when she hit a correct note or managed to play a short song without mistakes. They would smile and say, "See, you are learning." But the girl did not feel happy. She felt pressure and expectation. The music was supposed to be beautiful, but for her, it only reminded her of what she did not want to do. Despite her reluctance, there were moments when something magical happened. Sometimes when she thought no one was watching, she would press the keys slowly, experimenting with sounds. She would tap different notes together, creating little melodies that felt like secret songs just for her. She didn't understand why, but the notes sounded right, flowing from her fingers as if they had always been there. She would smile quietly, hiding her joy because she feared someone would make her stop and call it practice. Her teacher noticed it sometimes. When she watched the girl play without guidance, she would pause, eyebrows raised, and say nothing. There was something in the way the girl moved her fingers, a natural sense of rhythm and pitch that could not be taught. But the girl herself did not see it. She only saw frustration and the long hours of sitting at the piano, trying to remember the next note. At home, her brother would sometimes sit beside her watching her play. He liked the sounds, the way they filled the room. "You're really good at that," he would say innocently. The girl would shake her head. "I'm not," she would reply. "I'm just pressing keys." She did not yet realize that what came naturally to her was something special. Days passed slowly. The girl would wake up in the morning dreading the lessons, dragging her feet as she walked to the piano. She would practice trying to be obedient, but her heart was elsewhere. She wanted to climb trees, to chase butterflies, to explore the world beyond her backyard. The piano felt like a cage, beautiful and shiny, but still a cage. Yet, there were moments when her fingers moved with surprising ease. A note here, a chord there, and suddenly a melody would appear that was softer, sweeter, and more flowing than anything she had learned in her lessons. She would stop immediately, almost afraid that the magic would disappear if anyone saw her. Those small bursts of music became her secret, a tiny rebellion against the strict rules of practice. Her parents, busy with work and daily chores, noticed little things. They would hear a fragment of a song while she was humming in the kitchen or playing quietly when she thought no one was looking. They would smile to themselves, thinking maybe she is starting to enjoy it. But the girl did not notice their hope. She only felt the tension between what she wanted and what was expected of her. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating lesson, she ran outside into the garden, tears streaming down her face. She sat under the biggest tree, the one with wide protective branches, and tried to calm herself. She did not want to play the piano anymore. She wanted to be free, to laugh without thinking about mistakes or notes. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind in the leaves, the birds singing, the distant sound of children playing. For a moment it felt perfect. It felt like the world belonged to her, not to rules or schedules. When she returned inside, her mother noticed her mood. "How was your lesson?" she asked gently. The girl shook her head, not trusting herself to speak without tears. Her mother knelt beside her, taking her hands. "I know it's hard. It's okay to feel frustrated. But remember, everyone starts somewhere. You have a gift, even if you don't see it yet." The girl nodded silently. She did not know if she believed it. A gift. She had only felt pressure, frustration, and the longing to escape. But her mother's words lingered, a small seed planted in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, was something inside her that she didn't understand yet. As weeks turned into months, the girl continued her reluctant routine. She would practice, often complaining, often wishing she could be anywhere else. But slowly, the small flashes of her hidden talent appeared more often. A note held perfectly, a chord struck with ease, a rhythm that felt natural and flowing. Even she began to notice it, though she did not know what to make of it at times. Her teacher would stop mid-lesson and look at her with surprise. "You have a natural ear for this," she would say. "I can see it now." The girl would shrug, unsure how to respond. She felt nothing special, only the mix of frustration and the fleeting moments of enjoyment when the music seemed to come alive under her fingers. Her brother, ever curious, continued to watch and listen. He loved the small melodies she would play when she thought no one was paying attention. He would clap quietly and say, "That sounded nice." The girl would roll her eyes, but secretly felt a spark of pride. Perhaps she was doing something right, even if it didn't feel like it. The little girl's life at that time was a delicate balance. She wanted to be free, to explore, to create on her own terms. Yet she was learning something new, something that she did not yet understand fully, but that held a small, growing magic inside it. The piano, once a symbol of obligation and frustration, slowly becoming a place where something inside her could awaken, even if she could not see it yet. And so each day she returned to the piano. Sometimes with tears, sometimes with a reluctant sigh, sometimes with a small smile when a note rang out just right. She did not yet know that these small moments were the beginning of something extraordinary. She did not yet know that the music hidden inside her was waiting for the right time to shine. But for now, it was enough that she played, even when she did not want to, and that each note, each small melody, was slowly becoming a part of her story, waiting to grow into something beautiful. The little girl had grown used to the rhythm of her days. She would wake up, have breakfast, go to school, return home, and sit reluctantly at the piano. The lessons continued, the notes still sometimes harsh and difficult. Yet something inside her had begun to change, even if she did not understand it. The moments of secret music she found on her own were becoming more frequent, and her fingers seemed to remember things her mind could not explain. One afternoon, after a particularly long day at school, she sat at the piano as usual. Her teacher had assigned a new piece, a song with many notes and sudden changes in rhythm. Her first attempts were messy. The notes stumbled over each other, and the rhythm seemed impossible to catch. She felt frustrated and on the verge of tears, convinced she would never play it correctly. Her teacher sat quietly beside her watching. "Take a deep breath," she said softly. "Listen to the notes. Don't just follow them. Feel them." The girl looked at her teacher, unsure what she meant. Feel them? She tried to close her eyes and imagine the sound. Slowly, her fingers began to move differently, less rigid, more like they were remembering something they already knew. A few notes sounded right, then a small series of chords that seemed to flow naturally. The teacher's eyes lit up. "Do you hear that? That's beautiful. Keep going." Encouraged by the teacher's praise, the girl continued. The more she played, the more she began to trust her own instincts. She noticed the patterns in the music, the rise and fall, the way one note led naturally to the next. For the first time, she felt the music inside her, instead of seeing it only as a task. That evening, after her parents had finished dinner and her brother had gone to bed, she sat at the piano again. No one was watching. She played softly, letting her fingers wander across the keys. The melody that emerged was simple but flowing like a small river finding its path. She closed her eyes, letting the notes guide her. It felt like she was speaking without words, sharing something she did not yet have the language to explain. Her mother, passing by the living room, paused at the doorway. She listened quietly, her heart swelling. She recognized the difference immediately. This was not the careful, precise playing her teacher required. It was music from the heart, raw and expressive. She stayed for a few moments, listening to the girl's secret performance, and then quietly walked away. Not wanting to interrupt or take the moment away from her, days passed, and the girl began to experiment more. She would take the simplest songs her teacher assigned and change them, adding her own rhythms and notes. Sometimes she would play a note differently just because it sounded right to her. The teacher noticed this creativity during lessons. "You have an incredible instinct," she said. "Many students can follow instructions perfectly, but few can create something that feels so alive." At school, the girl noticed how music started to affect her mood. On days when she was frustrated or sad, she would hum small melodies under her breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease. Music became a secret companion, a friend who understood her without judgment. Her friends sometimes noticed her humming, but she would smile and wave it off. Not yet ready to share the depth of her feelings with anyone, one afternoon, while practicing a particularly challenging song, she discovered something unexpected. She had been trying to play a rapid sequence of notes, stumbling repeatedly. Frustrated, she pressed the keys almost absent-mindedly, and a new melody came out, flowing and surprising, yet perfectly in harmony. She stopped and listened, astonished. The music had not been written anywhere, it had come from her own imagination. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Could she really create music that no one else had played before? The next day, she showed a fragment of the melody to her teacher. The teacher listened carefully, her eyes widening with admiration. "This is amazing," she said. "You have a gift, something rare. Most children only follow the notes given to them. You can make music your own. This is just the beginning." The girl felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride, because she had discovered something truly special inside herself. Fear, because it meant more expectation, more pressure. She still loved playing freely, without rules, without someone watching or judging. But now she understood that her secret talent had value beyond the moments when she played alone. Her parents noticed the change too. She no longer sat at the piano with a sullen expression. Her fingers moved with confidence, and her music began to sound more polished. They were proud, though they tried not to push her too hard, remembering how resistant she had been at first. "We see how much you are growing," her mother said one evening. "We are proud of you, but don't forget to enjoy it. It's not just about lessons or performances." The girl nodded, appreciating their understanding. One weekend, a family friend came over and heard her playing. Unlike her teacher or her parents, this friend had no idea what was expected or required in piano lessons. She listened quietly, then whispered, "You play with your heart. That is rare. You don't just play the piano, you make it speak." The little girl felt a thrill of recognition. Someone else noticed what she had felt all along. Her secret was no longer completely hidden, and for the first time, she felt seen. Encouraged by this, she began to take small risks in her playing. She would combine the songs she had learned with her own melodies, creating pieces that were a mix of structured learning and spontaneous creativity. Each note became a choice, each chord a conversation with the piano. She experimented with dynamics, playing softly and then loudly, letting the emotion guide her fingers. She began to understand that music was not just notes on a page, but a way to express what she could not say in words. At school, her music began to influence her in other ways. She felt more confident in class, more willing to share ideas. She noticed how patterns in music helped her understand patterns in math and reading. She even began to write short stories inspired by the emotions she expressed at the piano. Music and imagination became intertwined. Feeding each other, her teacher suggested that she try improvising for a few minutes at the beginning of each lesson. The girl hesitated, but then agreed. At first, she played cautiously, unsure of what to do. But slowly she let herself go, allowing her feelings to guide her hands. The melodies she created were surprising even to her. Sometimes they were happy and playful, sometimes wistful and soft, sometimes strong and bold. Each day, she discovered a new facet of her talent. Her parents continued to watch with gentle pride. They no longer reminded her constantly about practice. Instead, they allowed her to explore, giving her space to experiment. The little girl began to understand that the piano could be a source of joy, not just a duty. She began to play willingly, even eagerly, savoring the sound of the notes under her fingers. One evening, after the family had gone to bed, she sat alone at the piano and played for a long time. The room was silent except for the music, which filled every corner. She felt a deep connection to the instrument, a sense that it was a part of her, like an extension of her own emotions. She did not know how far her talent would take her, but she felt ready to explore it, to see where it could lead. The little girl had learned something important, that even in tasks that seemed forced or frustrating, there could be hidden treasures. Her talent, once hidden behind reluctance and resistance, was beginning to shine. She had discovered the joy of creation, the power of music to express what words could not, and the strength that came from persistence. Each day brought new discoveries, and with each note, she grew closer to understanding the gift that had been waiting inside her all along. As the weeks and months continued, the little girl's playing became more confident and expressive. She found herself thinking about music even when she was not at the piano, imagining melodies in her mind, tapping rhythms on tables, and humming softly as she walked through the garden. The piano was no longer just an obligation. It had become a friend, companion that responded to her feelings and imagination. Her teacher began to introduce more challenging pieces, and the girl met them with growing excitement rather than fear. She learned to balance precision with creativity, following the notes while also adding her own voice. She began to notice the way music could tell a story, how a series of notes could evoke happiness, sadness, suspense, or wonder. Each new song became an adventure, a puzzle to solve, a canvas for her emotions. The little girl's journey was far from over, but she had taken the first important steps from reluctance to discovery. She had learned that her talent was not just about hitting the right notes, but about listening to herself, trusting her instincts, and allowing her heart to guide her fingers. The piano, once a source of frustration, was slowly revealing its true magic, and she was beginning to understand the joy that came from creating something beautiful from within herself. The little girl's journey with the piano had grown from reluctant practice into a quiet, personal discovery. She was beginning to realize that the music she created was hers alone, a secret world where she could express emotions she could not put into words. Each day she spent time at the piano, exploring different keys, experimenting with rhythms, and letting her fingers wander across the black and white keys to see what melodies would emerge, despite her growing confidence. She still struggled with the lessons assigned by her teacher. Sometimes the structure felt too strict, the exercises too repetitive. But now, instead of feeling defeated, she looked at these challenges as opportunities to blend her own creativity with the guidance she was given. When she encountered a difficult passage, she would pause, close her eyes, and try to hear it in her mind first. Then she would play it slowly, letting her instincts guide her fingers, gradually finding the rhythm and flow that felt natural one day. After a particularly challenging lesson, she stayed behind while the teacher tidied up the piano. She hesitated for a moment, then began to play a melody that had been forming in her head for days. It was soft and flowing at first, then grew louder and more confident. She closed her eyes, completely absorbed in the music. Each note carried a feeling: joy, curiosity, longing, and a touch of sadness. It was as though the piano was speaking for her, expressing thoughts she could not yet articulate. The teacher, hearing the music from outside, paused and listened. She smiled quietly, impressed by the girl's ability to convey such depth without instruction. She did not interrupt, knowing that this was a special moment. The girl's playing was no longer about practicing a task or meeting expectations. It was about discovering her own voice. Encouraged by these experiences, the girl began to create short compositions. She would write them down in a notebook, sketching the notes roughly, not caring about perfection, but about capturing the feeling. Sometimes, she would hum the melody before playing it, letting it develop naturally. Her compositions were simple, but they were honest, reflecting her thoughts and dreams. She felt a quiet pride. Knowing that these melodies came entirely from her imagination, her parents noticed her growing passion. She no longer complained about practice. She often stayed at the piano longer than required, exploring new sounds and creating melodies. They watched quietly, proud of her persistence and creativity. One evening, her mother sat beside her, listening to a new piece she had composed. "It's beautiful," her mother said softly. "You're really finding your own voice in the music." The girl smiled, feeling seen and understood. It was the first time she realized that music could be more than lessons, could be a reflection of herself. School life continued alongside her musical growth. She had friends who loved to play games and talk about adventures. She enjoyed those moments, but music had become her secret refuge. Whenever she felt anxious or frustrated, she would hum a melody quietly, letting it calm her mind. She even began to notice connections between music and other parts of life, how patterns in a song could help her solve a puzzle, or how rhythm could help her remember sequences in a story. Music was becoming a lens through which she understood the world. Her teacher introduced her to more complex compositions, pieces that required careful attention to dynamics and phrasing. At first, the girl felt intimidated, but instead of resisting, she approached the challenge with curiosity. She learned to break the pieces into smaller sections, practicing slowly and listening carefully. As she mastered each part, she found ways to add her own interpretation, making the pieces her own while still respecting the composer's intent. This balance between structure and freedom became one of her favorite aspects of playing. One afternoon, a neighbor came by while the girl was practicing. Curious, the neighbor listened quietly, captivated by the melody that filled the room. "You play beautifully," the neighbor said when she finished. "Have you ever thought about performing for others?" The girl hesitated, unsure if she was ready. Performing meant leaving her private world of music and sharing it with people she didn't know. It felt both exciting and frightening. The idea of performing lingered in her mind. She began to experiment with small performances at home, playing for her family without being asked. She noticed that sharing her music brought a new kind of joy, different from the quiet satisfaction of playing alone. Her parents clapped and cheered, encouraging her gently, while her brother would dance around the living room laughing and clapping along. These moments showed her that music could connect people, creating happiness and warmth beyond her own private enjoyment. Encouraged by these small experiences, she took a small step further. She decided to improvise more during lessons, exploring emotions and themes in ways she had not tried before. Sometimes her music was playful, full of skipping notes and laughter. Other times it was soft and contemplative, reflecting her inner thoughts. Each improvisation was a journey, and each journey helped her understand herself a little better. She began to recognize that music was not just a skill to be learned, it was a way to communicate her feelings, dreams, and imagination. As her confidence grew, she became more willing to take risks. She would combine elements of different songs, mix tempos, and play with dynamics in ways that surprised even her teacher. Sometimes mistakes happened, but she learned to see them not as failures, but as part of the creative process. Each mistake was a chance to discover a new melody or rhythm. Each discovery added to her growing love of music. Her parents noticed that music was shaping her character as well. She was becoming more patient, more attentive, and more resilient. The perseverance she showed at the piano began to appear in other areas of her life. She approached schoolwork with greater focus, faced challenges with determination, and found new ways to express herself through writing and drawing. Music was not just a part of her life, it was influencing who she was becoming. One day, her teacher suggested that she record a short piece she had composed. The girl was nervous, unsure if her music was good enough to be shared even in this small way. But she agreed, and as she played, she focused on the emotion rather than perfection. When she listened to the recording afterward, she was surprised. The music sounded alive, full of feeling, and she realized that what she had created was meaningful. It was not about impressing others. It was about expressing herself. This realization gave her a new sense of confidence and freedom. The little girl's musical world was expanding rapidly. She began to imagine stories and scenes as she played, letting her fingers paint pictures and sound. A soft, flowing melody could become a quiet morning in a garden. A series of fast, lively notes could become a playful chase through the streets. Music had become a tool for storytelling, a language she could use to share the experiences she imagined and the emotions she felt. Even her teachers and friends began to notice the change. Her teacher admired the creativity and emotional depth in her playing. Her friends, who had initially thought of music as something distant and difficult, began to appreciate it more when she shared short melodies with them. The little girl felt a quiet pride, understanding that her music could touch others, even if just a little. She was learning that creativity was not only personal, it could build connections. Despite all this progress, she still faced moments of doubt. Sometimes, she would sit at the piano and feel unsure, wondering if she was truly talented or just lucky. But instead of giving up, she learned to use these moments as opportunities to listen more closely, to trust her instincts, and to explore further. Each doubt became a stepping stone, each challenge a chance to grow. As the seasons changed, her practice became a mix of learning, experimenting, and expressing. She would start with exercises, warm up with scales, then move into improvisation and composition. Sometimes she would repeat a small melody over and over, refining it, exploring its possibilities. Other times, she would let her imagination roam freely, creating entirely new pieces that surprised even her. Her parents continued to support her, offering encouragement without pressure. They understood that her journey was unique, and they celebrated her growth in ways that respected her independence. The little girl began to appreciate their understanding, realizing that her talent was nurtured not just by lessons, but by love, patience, and support. By the end of this period in her life, the little girl had grown significantly, both as a musician and as a person. She had learned to balance structure and creativity, to find joy in challenges, and to express herself through music. She had discovered that the piano was not just an instrument, but a companion, a storyteller, and a reflection of her own inner world. She still had much to learn, and there were many more experiences waiting for her, but she was ready. She had found the courage to explore, the patience to persist, and the imagination to create. The hidden talent that had once been buried under reluctance and resistance was now beginning to shine. And the little girl was discovering the true magic of music for herself. The little girl had grown in ways that even she had not fully understood. Her piano was no longer just a task or a private escape. It had become a world where she could explore her feelings, imagination, and creativity. Yet there was one thing she had not faced before: performing for an audience. Her teacher, noticing the growth in the girl's confidence and skill, suggested she'd participate in a small recital at a local music school. The idea made the girl's heart race with both excitement and fear. Performing meant leaving the comfort of her home, leaving the piano where it felt familiar, and playing in front of people she did not know. She felt nervous, unsure if she was ready to share her music so openly. The weeks leading up to the recital were filled with a mixture of practice and anxiety. She would play her pieces repeatedly, trying to perfect every note. Sometimes she would stumble and feel frustrated, worried that the audience would judge her harshly. Her parents encouraged her gently, reminding her that the purpose was not to be perfect, but to share her music. They promised to be there, cheering her on. And this comfort helped her take small steps toward readiness. In the evenings, she would sit at the piano, imagining the audience in front of her. She would close her eyes and play, pretending she was telling a story to the people watching. She realized that the music she created could express her emotions and ideas even without words. Each note became a bridge between her inner world and the outside, a way to communicate with people who could not know her thoughts directly. As the recital day approached, the girl's nervousness grew. She would pace in her room thinking about what could go wrong. What if she forgot a note? What if she played too softly or too loudly? What if the audience did not understand her music? These worries crowded her mind, making it difficult to focus. But she also remembered the moments of joy she had felt while creating her own melodies and the pride she had felt. When her family and teacher recognized her talent, these memories gave her courage. The recital hall was small but filled with people. Parents, teachers, and other students were all there, waiting for their turn or supporting their loved ones. The little girl felt a flutter of anxiety as she stepped onto the stage. The piano looked larger and more imposing than at home, the lights brighter, the room full of expectant faces. Her fingers hovered over the keys, her heart pounding. Her teacher gave her a reassuring nod from the side of the stage. The little girl took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then began to play. The first notes were hesitant, but as she continued, something remarkable happened. She felt the music flow through her, carrying her fear away. Her fingers moved with confidence, each note expressing the emotion she had been feeling for months. The audience listened quietly, captivated by the beauty and honesty of her playing. The little girl's music told a story, soft and tender at times, lively and playful at others, deep and thoughtful in moments of reflection. She forgot about her fears, forgetting that she was being watched. All that existed was the music and the way it connected her to the room. When she finished, there was a brief moment of silence, and then the audience erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, and for a moment, she felt tears in her eyes. Her parents smiled proudly, her teacher beamed with pride, and even some of the other students looked impressed. She realized that her music had reached people, touched them in a way that words could not. After the recital, many people came up to compliment her. Some praised the technical skill, while others admired the emotion and creativity in her performance. The little girl felt a mix of pride and relief. She had faced her fear and found that sharing her music brought a new kind of joy, different from the private satisfaction she felt at home. The experience gave her a new understanding of her talent. She realized that music was not just for herself, not just a private escape, but a way to connect with others. She began to think about how her music could bring happiness, comfort, and inspiration to people, and this idea excited her more than any lesson or practice had before. Back at home, she sat at the piano again, replaying the piece she had performed. This time, it was different. She played not out of obligation or fear, but with confidence and pride. She experimented with the dynamics, adding small flourishes and personal touches. The music felt alive in a new way, enriched by the experience of sharing it with others. Her parents continued to support her, understanding that this was just the beginning. They encouraged her to continue exploring, to take risks, and to find joy in every note. The little girl began to see the piano not as a challenge or requirement, but as a friend, a companion that reflected her emotions, imagination, and growth. In the weeks that followed, she performed in small settings for family and friends, each time gaining more confidence. She began to look forward to sharing her music, discovering that it could inspire others just as it had inspired her. The fear she had felt initially became a small, manageable part of the process, replaced by excitement and anticipation. The little girl also began to compose more original pieces. Inspired by the recital, she wanted to create music that expressed her thoughts, dreams, and experiences. She would sit at the piano for hours, experimenting with melodies, harmonies, and rhythms. Sometimes the pieces were short and simple, other times long and complex. But each one carried a piece of her heart. Her teacher encouraged this creative exploration, helping her refine her compositions and offering guidance without taking away her personal expression. Together, they explored new techniques and styles, blending classical training with the girl's own inventive ideas. This collaboration helped her see that learning and creativity could coexist, each enhancing the other. At school, She shared her music with close friends in small, informal performances. She discovered the joy of seeing people respond to her melodies, their smiles and expressions reflecting the emotions she had put into the music. This connection, small but meaningful, showed her that music could communicate in ways that words often could not. The little girl's confidence grew steadily. She began to understand that mistakes were part of the process, that imperfection could add character to a performance, and that emotion and intention were more important than technical flawlessness. She learned to trust herself, to believe in her talent, and to embrace the joy of creation. Her family continued to nurture her talent, encouraging her to explore opportunities while respecting her pace and individuality. They celebrated her successes, large and small, without putting undue pressure on her. The little girl felt supported, loved, free to grow in her own way. Through these experiences, she learned important lessons. She discovered that fear and hesitation were natural, but could be overcome through preparation, practice, and trust in oneself. She learned that music was not just a skill, but a form of communication and self-expression. And she realized that sharing her talent could bring joy not only to herself, but to others as well. By the end of this period, the little girl had transformed. She had moved from a place of reluctance and uncertainty to one of confidence and creativity. She had faced the challenge of performing in front of an audience, found that her music could touch hearts and connect people. Her hidden talent, once buried under doubt and resistance, was shining brightly. And she was beginning to understand the power and beauty of her own abilities. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a reflection of her growth, courage, and imagination. Each key held the potential for discovery. Each melody carried a piece of her heart, and each performance opened a new world of possibility. She knew that there were more challenges ahead, more experiences to face, and more music to create, but she was ready. With every note, she was learning not just about music, but about herself and the joy of sharing her gifts with the world.